Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This will be our last meeting before Christmas, so I guess this is a good time to say Merry Christmas to everybody. And
Merry Christmas.
it's been a good year for us, and hope it's been a good year for you. So that said, Jim says no introductions today.
No, I think we can suspend. We got a long agenda. Let's get to it.
Okay, and our invocation today is Father Jeffrey Freight. Thank you for being here, and Councilman Kukio will lead us in the pledge immediately after the invocation, so let's all stand.
Let us pray to the Lord. Lord, have mercy. O Lord Jesus Christ, our God, accept our fervent supplication and bless the good intent and work of your servants, that they may begin favorably and may complete it unto your glory without any obstacle. Assist the workers and direct the work of their hands, and cause it to be brought speedily to completion by the power of your most Holy Spirit. For yours it is to be merciful and to save us, our God, and unto you do we ascribe glory together with your Father, who is without beginning, in your most holy, good, and life-giving Spirit, now and ever and unto the ages of ages. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, this is a regular voting meeting of the Prescott City Council. Today is Tuesday, December the 16th. Let's go to roll call.
Mayor Kirkendall.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Lamerson.
Here.
Councilman Arnold.
Here.
Councilman Blair.
Here.
Councilman Kuknio.
Here.
Councilman Lozelle.
Here.
Councilwoman Wilcox. Here. All present.
Okay, any announcements, Mr. Manager? Okay, let's go to the first presentation from State Farm Insurance.
Good afternoon, Mayor. I'd like to invite up Kathy Trent and Dennis Bergs, along with Dean Hinshaw, as they have a presentation to the city and specifically the Prescott Fire Department. With
Great.
that, I'll turn it over to Kathy.
Good afternoon. I'm State Farm Agent Kathy Trent, and with me is State Farm Agent Dennis Burks. At State Farm, we strive to build strong, safe, and better educated communities. At the end of last year, Engineer Dean Hinshaw and I had a conversation, thank you, about the joint efforts of the departments of the Quad City area we're making to reduce the number of homes with no smoke detectors or ones that weren't functioning properly. If there is anyone that hates a fire as much as a firefighter, it's an insurance agent. The 10 local State Farm agents chose to each contribute personally to help the effort. We thought it was such a good cause, we wanted to get the State Farm Foundation involved as well. I am pleased to present this State Farm Good Neighbor Citizenship Grant in the form of a check for $5,000 from State Farm Insurance to the Prescott Fire Department for their use in bringing awareness around fire safety and providing smoke detectors to families that otherwise wouldn't be able to afford them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Chief, you're gonna say a few words?
Yes,
Chief? Okay.
Yes, just on behalf of Kathy, who assisted with writing the grant, Dean, and those applications that we've put in before us, this $5,000 will do a lot for this community. And if anybody in the neighborhood or in the city of Prescott ever needs a smoke detector, please call our administrative offices, 777-1700, and we'll try to sort things out for you. Smoke detectors are really the first line of defense for any family and aids in their survivability immensely. So thank you very much, State Farm.
Thank you.
Dennis, Kathy, and the community for our support. Thank you.
That's yours.
Thank you very much.
All together.
Thanks.
Okay, let's go to the consent agenda, and before we discuss it, items E, F, and G have to be read in their entirety by the clerk because they are ordinances. And then Councilwoman Wilcox has a question on E. And we can decide whether it needs to be removed or whether it can be resolved. Is that fair enough? Okay. So why don't you go ahead?
Item 2E, adoption of ordinance number 4915-1453, granting an ingress-egress easement to Thomas Conti. Ordinance number 4915-1453, an ordinance of the mayor and council of the city of Prescott, Yavapai County, Arizona, granting an ingress-egress easement to Thomas Conti and authorizing the mayor and council to execute any and all documents to effectuate the said easement. Item 2F, adoption of ordinance number 4919-1457, authorizing acceptance of a public water easement dedication from Macarich WTC II Corporation, a Delaware corporation. Ordinance number 4919-1457, an ordinance of the mayor and council of the city of Prescott, Yavapai County, Arizona, authorizing the acceptance of a public water easement dedication from Macarich WTC II Corporation, a Delaware corporation, and authorizing the mayor and council to execute any and all documents to effectuate said easement dedication. Item 2G, adoption of ordinance number 4920-1458, authorizing acceptance of a public utility easement from Granite Dells Estates Properties Incorporated. Ordinance number 4920-1458, an ordinance of the mayor and council of the city of Prescott, Yavapai County, Arizona, authorizing the acceptance of a public utility easement from Granite Dells Estates Properties Incorporated, and authorizing the mayor and staff to execute any and all documents to effectuate said easement.
Okay, let's go back to E. Councilman Wilcox.
Thank you,
Councilwoman.
Mayor. I have no objection to the easement, except that I would like to require that the utilities be underground. And as I read through the agreement and the easement, I didn't see any mention or requirement that the utilities would have to be underground. It just says public and private utilities. And my reason for doing that is generally in this area to the south, it's been developed with underground utilities, and it would be more coherent with the neighboring properties to the south, and also consistent with open space values which border and are part of this property.
Well, we could certainly amend the easement document. Let me just see here. I think we could just add the word in the easement itself, where after ingress, egress, and the installation, operation, and maintenance of, we would add the word underground, public, and private utilities.
Yes, that would do it.
Okay,
So is that a change to the not the ordinance, but the document?
No, it's, the ordinance is fine. The document itself is an exhibit to the ordinance. Mayor, if I can recommend, I would recommend that the council adopt the consent agenda exclusive of this particular item, and then come back and have a specific motion on this particular item. E?
Yes.
it's E. And we can do that today, okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
So you heard the attorney, do we have a motion?
Mayor,
Okay.
I move to adopt consent agenda items 1A through 1I with the exception of 1E.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Vote, please.
Mr. Blair?
Aye.
Okay.
Passes unanimously.
Okay. Let's go back to E. You want to make that motion with the
Yes.
change?
Yes, on agenda item 1E, I move that we adopt ordinance number 4915-1453, granting an ingress-egress easement to Thomas Contini, with the change that the word underground be inserted before the word utilities in all of the documents that are part of this action.
Mayor, I would second that, but I'd like to ask our Public Works Department if that's an issue, if that's acceptable, et cetera.
Is the property owner here?
Well, by limiting it, it only limits us,
He says it's
not the property owner.
It's public and private utilities. The easement is for ingress, egress, and public and private utilities.
Okay.
So,
So let's start with staff, and I just would like to hear from staff if that creates any potential problems.
Good.
Afternoon, Mayor, Council. Question to your, answer your question, Councilman. Actually, the intent is to have them underground. That's been the intent since the beginning.
Okay. And was that discussed with the property owner?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it's and all the utilities are going to be underneath, in the roadway easement underneath there. That was the entire intent.
Perfect.
Okay.
Mayor, I've got no issue with seconding the motion.
Okay, motion made and seconded, vote. Steve?
Mr. Blair? Mr. Blair, are you still there? I'll call him back.
He went south. Yeah, there you go. He's up on a ladder someplace.
Did you vote yes?
Yes, it's an aye.
Okay, passes unanimously.
Okay, we're going to the regular agenda, item A.
Item 2A, public hearing and consideration of a Series 12 restaurant liquor license application from Michael Raymond Sally, applicant for Sally's Barbecue and Taste Buds Pizza, located at 334 South Montezuma Street. Mayor and Council, the liquor license application was posted for the required 20 days. It was routed through Community Development and the Police Department. No public comments were received and no issues were raised. The applicant fee has been paid, and the applicant is not present, but a representative is present from the
Okay,
establishment.
good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mayor.
Tell us what you're going to do.
I'll try and sell some barbecue and some pizza. My name is Jason Sally. I'm a new resident to Prescott. I'm here on behalf of my parents. Unfortunately, my father fell ill this morning, so it's kind of short notice for myself. We have a barbecue business in Sedona. We've been doing food service for about 25 years now. It's a family-owned, operated business, and we're just proud to be part of the community.
Good. Well, I'm sure that there will be some that will enjoy the barbecue.
I hope so. And I actually brought some pizza for anybody that cares for some.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Did you bring enough for everybody, or you
Well, you can have a bite each, I suppose.
didn't know how many's going to be here? Yeah.
Fantastic.
Any questions?
should vote before you eat the pizza.
Okay. Any questions from the council? Do we have a motion?
Mayor, I move to close public hearing.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Vote, please.
Mr. Blair?
Aye.
Passes unanimously.
Just so you know, we had some discussion earlier on the timing on this. You know, licenses are renewable January 1st each year.
Okay.
And we didn't want you to get stuck and have to pay for 2 weeks. And the process she'll make sure that it happens.
All right. Well, thank
So that
you
you
very
only have to pay one license.
We appreciate that.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
You good?
Okay.
Mayor?
Uh-huh.
Move to approve liquor license application number 121-33600 for a Series 12 restaurant license for Sally's Barbecue and Taste Buds Pizza located at 334 South Montezuma Street.
Second.
Motion made and seconded for the approval. Vote.
Mr. Blair?
Yes.
Passes unanimously.
When you're ready, item B.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 2B, approval of a 2-year agreement with Arthur Markham to serve as Prescott City Judge, City Contract Number 2015-078.
Mayor and Council, the city charter provides that the city court is presided over by the city judge. City judge is appointed by the council in December of each even-numbered year, which is effectively now, it being December 2014. The term of office is for 2 years. The agreement which is in place today is or engages the city court judge on a temporary part-time employee basis, and the council has an interest in changing that to an independent contractor basis, which is reflected in the agreement you have before you, which would be effective January 2nd for a 2-year term. The new agreement provides for annual contract compensation, which is comparable to the total city cost of the current agreement. The current annual cost of the city court judge is $76,326.40. Again, the contract in your packet, the 2-year contract, would provide compensation or comparable to that city cost. Judge Markham is here if you have any questions for the judge. Otherwise, this is the item before you.
This is the item that we asked one of our council members to work with the manager and the attorney in working out these numbers. And
that was my that was me, Mayor.
So.
And if I just could say, I'm glad to see Judge Markham to be with us another 2 years. You do a fine job, sir.
Yeah. Any other questions from the council?
Yes, Mayor. Judge, thank you very much for stepping up again to serve as the city magistrate and provide that service. We had the opportunity to tour your courtroom last year. My question is for the city manager and potentially for HR. We had previously had some questions about if an independent contractor has supervisory responsibilities over city employees, how would that work? Who is the ultimate city employee that's responsible for evaluations, oversight, HR issues related to, and as an example, it specifically reads, item I, the city judge shall supervise the city court clerk and other staff.
Well, perhaps the city attorney may want to step in, but the relationship is that the city judge is an appointed position. City council appoints 4 positions: city manager, city attorney, city clerk, city court judge. So as an appointed official, the city manager exercises supervisory responsibility. The difference here is that it's a contractual engagement rather than an employee engagement, but I think functionally it's equivalent.
And we, regarding paragraph I of the agreement, that's consistent with the city charter provides that the city judge shall have direct supervisory responsibility over the court staff. What that means, and again, when the charter was written, it's hard to know what was contemplated, whether you had a full-time employee or a part-time or an independent contractor. But what that means to me, when I read the charter, consistent, and then the agreement being sort of consistent with that, is that the day-to-day operation of the court, as the city court, is under the supervision of the judge, and the judge has the day-to-day supervisory responsibility over that court staff. However, unlike the charter change that affected the legal department a few years back before I got here, ultimately any sort of administrative, disciplinary action or termination of staff would have to go through the city manager's office. So there's sort of this separation. The day-to-day, which sort of it makes sense from a practical and is also consistent with the charter, obviously would be under the control of the city judge, but sort of the larger picture issues in terms of negative or disciplinary actions, termination, and even the final sort of approval. The judge can make the recommendations as council approve the potential for merit increases. That all still has to go, in my view, to or through the city manager's office to ultimately sign off on that. Obviously, the judge working with those folks is going to have the best first-hand knowledge of what to recommend, but the sort of the final approval authority would be with the city manager. So sort of a bifurcated system, but I think that's both that's the intent of the charter as well as sort of a good practical outcome.
So just scenario, if there's a disciplinary issue within a court staff position, would it be the opposite? I don't want there to be any uncertainty about this. If there's an issue, would it be the judge coming to the city manager to bring it to their attention? Or how does that work under this type of a structure?
Yes, please. Our system is based on basically separation of powers, and certainly the court system is part of the city government, but there really has to be an independence of the operation and management of the city court. You certainly tell us what our budget is. You tell us whether we can give raises or not. Thank you so much on behalf of my employees for that possibility. But I think really it should be the judge who is in charge of the ultimate say-so of whether to discipline somebody, subject to the right to have hearings according to the city ordinance. The HR would have the right to have hearings to decide whether that was proper or not. But I think the ultimate decision on whether to initiate a disciplinary action or to give a pay increase should be the city judge. I must say that I read that paragraph I, and I saw no problems with it, even being an independent contractor, but it was my intent that, or my understanding, that indeed the city judge would have that authority to, in fact, manage the city court and the personnel, subject to the rights to appeal or the other regulatory rights they have.
And just to be clear, the any kind of disciplinary action, because the court staff is still subject to all of the city manager or HR policies, and which include any sort of disciplinary action where there's a taking away of any, essentially any a suspension or termination, does ultimately for all staff go to the city manager, at least as a matter of right, to the employee, who can appeal any sort of departmental or HR imposed disciplinary action. All city employees have the right to appeal to the city manager. There are some exceptions on the public safety side with specific statutory provisions for police officers, but generally speaking, the city manager is the ultimate decision maker in that disciplinary arena.
Okay, so that leads me to one additional question. Under this agreement, is the person that we're entering into the contract, in this case the judge, subject to the city's employee handbook and supervisory rules and restrictions that we have as an independent contractor?
Technically none of the appointees are, because the city employee handbook is implemented or imposed by the city manager. So all the employees other than the appointees, so whether the judge is a part-time employee or an independent contractor, he's technically not subject to the employee handbook, nor is the clerk or the city attorney. However, because we're all council appointees, so although I think by sort of inference you can make us subject to that, and again it's a little bit different with the judge in terms of any disciplinary action. The judge actually, a city judge actually has sort of more protection. The three of us are all at will. The judge is not. In other words, you have to have there's a due process hearing required for any sort of judge because of the separation of powers, and because state law basically says you can only terminate a judge or disciplinary a judge if there is some sort of due process hearing. So it's a little bit of different, whether he's a contractor or an employee. It's a separate kind of process. But so again, technically the appointees aren't subject to the manager's HR rules. However, I think just by implication, you've made us subject to that and something else.
Okay. I may have another question, but I will yield for now.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to comment that at first glance, it appears that Judge Markham is getting a huge raise here, but looking at the numbers in more detail, the city and the judge come out about even, because the judge will have to pay his own Social Security, et cetera, employment taxes, and this makes it much simpler, I think, for both parties to have the judge be an independent contractor as opposed to employee.
Councilwoman, that's right. I will now be paying the employer share of Social Security and Medicare, and so even though the numbers go up, rather than the city paying those numbers, now I'm paying those numbers, which knocks down my net income. I went into this roughly looking for about a 2% raise per year for this year and next year. I've been blessed by the position I have at the Prescott Consolidated Court, and so really I'm not looking for the percentage as much as just trying to make sure it's a working relationship. And really one of the primary things I was concerned about was just to make clear that if I get sued as a city judge, that indeed the city, because I'm the appointee of the city, will in fact legally represent me, and that's clear in this contract. That was the primary thing I was looking for in this contract, and if the city prefers me to be an independent contractor, I'm okay with that.
Okay. Jim?
Thank you. Yeah, I prefer you to be an independent contractor, Judge. I would like to remind everybody, though, as to why we went through the charter change process. And the situation in the city judge's office was not the same situation as what we had in the city's attorney's office, where some of our primary legal personnel were no longer responsible to the city attorney. They were responsible to city management. And there was a reason for asking the voters if it made sense in the separation of powers, as the judge was referencing, to have employees that were subject to one of our appointed people being told by another one of our appointed people, hands off, and intimidation, etc. So there was a reason why we changed that part of the operation, thus making the city attorney's employees subject to the city attorney, not at will to the city manager, in case one of us, the elected people, want an investigation on something that we think is improper, or that something's being done improperly. So that's one of the primary reasons for having changed that. That is not the same situation as we have in the judge's office as what we had in the attorney's office.
Okay, so I think from my perspective, I'm fine approving this agreement, but what I would ask our two appointed folks, which is the judge and the city manager, is I've heard two different answers on who's going to be responsible for oversight of the staff. I think that we need to have some clarification from my perspective so that it's clear and it doesn't create a problem potentially down the road.
Councilman, I mean, I can state right now that the day-to-day supervision of the employees of the city court will be under the city judge. As the city attorney has pointed out, the city manager would only get involved, for the record, according to the disciplinary appeals process.
Okay. Well, in that case, then, I've got no problem approving this agreement.
Judge, I have just a question. Number one, thanks for being a part of what we do. Where you have county employees and city employees working hand in hand, side by side, and I'm sure it works out, it has for a long time, where there might be changes, pay raises and things that might be different, has it ever created a problem?
No, it hasn't. In some years, the city employee might get a little bit extra. Some years, the county employee might get a little extra. I forget which was which, but going back 5-6 years ago when our economic crunch happened, I think it was the city that may have been more physically responsible and not giving raisins for a little bit, a year or two extra. And so there was that little thing. But really, they work so well together. Really, people don't ask, are you a city employee, a county employee? People just work on everything.
Good.
And because it's a consolidated court by intergovernmental agreement between the city and the county, the employees, whether they're a city employee or a county employee, will work on everything. So everybody's cross-trained, everybody can work on everything. So a city case can be worked on by a justice court clerk and vice versa. And so really, it's a team effort and really works out well inside as well as for the citizens of both the Yavapai County and the city of Prescott, obviously.
Good. Okay.
Yeah, I just got a question. It hit me. How does it benefit the city to make you an independent contractor?
I was kind of a quasi a person that had some city employee benefits and some not city employee benefits. I guess I defer to council or to city manager, but I'm okay either way. But I work less than 20 hours a week when you look at the average time, because the county job is more volume as far as the work goes. And so, well, basically, it seemed to be that I was hearing for years that was a preferred outcome, and I'm okay with that.
Councilman, from a layman standpoint, neither the council nor the city manager or any other appointees supervise the city judge. And so we were, under the current agreement, Judge Markham is a temporary part-time employee, but nobody supervises this employee. Hence, I think that the alternative of engaging the city court judge as an independent contractor began to be discussed at the council level in previous years.
Thank you.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion.
Okay?
I recommend we move.
But before we go there, let's go to the public for just a moment. Comments from the public?
My name is Daniel Matson. I'm a homeless advocate. And as a homeless advocate, I have occasion frequently to bring people to court, sit through court with them, help them make sure that they do the things they're supposed to do. And in doing this, I've sat in many courts, including Judge Markham's court. Of the courts I've been going to at several different levels, Judge Markham by far has the highest volume, and yet he manages it very, very well. I've always been impressed by the fairness and efficiency and the obvious care that he shows, and I think the city's getting a bargain. He manages his staff very, very well. I think obviously he needs to continue doing that in order to maintain the level of efficiencies he's managed. So I would definitely approve this, and I think the city's getting a real good deal out of it.
So that's a thumbs up?
Absolutely.
Okay. Anyone else comment? Okay, let's vote. Did we get a second?
I haven't even made a
motion. You make the motion. Okay, go.
Move to approve city contract number 2015-078.
Second.
Okay, motion made and seconded. Vote, please.
Councilman Blair?
Yes, with pleasure.
Passed unanimously.
Okay. Thanks, Judge. Okay. Item C.
Item 2C, approval of Acker Trust Board grants for fiscal year 2015.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council. This agenda item is a recommendation for the fiscal year 15 grant awards for the Acker Trust Grant Program. Just a little background, the JS Acker Trust was established in 1959 as part of a court adjudication of Mr. J.S. Acker's will, which left the majority of his estate to the city of Prescott for the use of our people, the children in particular. The trust board members are appointed by and serve as advisors to the mayor and council regarding the management of the trust. All of the money spent from the trust is used for either parks or the promotion of youth, primarily music. Every year, music organizations apply for Acker Trust grants through a grant process. These organizations must be incorporated, provide a financial statement, and must appear before the board for a 5-minute presentation. The board, in determining allocations for the limited resources available, consider both the financial need of the organizations and the number of participants served by their programs and the program's benefit to the community. The Acker Trust Board received applications in the amount of $7,650. The board met to review the applications and voted to recommend the following for approval. The Chaparral Music Fest in the amount of $2,500. The Yavapai College Foundation New Horizons Matinee Series in the amount of $2,500, and the Yavapai Symphony Association in the amount of $2,650 for a total of $7,650. There is no financial impact to the city of Prescott on these items, and with that, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Comments?
I have one question. It's not explained in the staff report, Joe, so could you tell us how each one of these 3 grants would specifically serve youth and music?
I can. In just a part of the application, one of the questions, which this is a pretty intense application process too, by the way. We do ask for a lot of information, but in a one-sentence description, which starts off the Acker grant funds being sought, for the Chaparral Music Fest. In June of 2015, Acker funds can help Chaparral Music Fest provide outreach to the schools, plus give families in Prescott who have limited financial resources a chance for their children to participate in 5 vocal and instrumental programs to put them on the same level as their more financially advantaged peers. So it's a scholarship program for vocal and instrumental programs. For the Yavapai College Foundation, the Matinee Series, the New Horizons School Matinee Series provides professional musical and theatrical performances at the beautiful Yavapai College Performing Arts Center to inspire, entertain, and educate school-aged children. And in the third one, the Symphony Association, This would partially fund a one-day master's class by the Phoenix Symphony Orchestra musicians to provide instruction and music instrument techniques, and also perform for 4 middle schools and high schools in the Prescott Unified School District.
Thank you. I just thought it was important to get that on the record, that this is all benefiting youth and children.
Jim?
You're right, Councilwoman Wilcox. Also, I think it's important to keep on the record that, of course, being on the ground level of Akronite in Prescott, this is a public-private partnership within the arts that has worked extremely well in the city of Prescott. It is absolutely a signature event to work with these folks. What we do, as we were elected the stewards of the monies that are distributed within the city of Prescott, what we do is just have oversight, but we use a committee of folks from the world of not only the arts but recreation, etc., to make these recommendations. And I think it's important for folks to understand this doesn't come out of the general fund of Prescott. This comes out through the donations of the private sector and the business community through the private sector to help fund opportunity for the arts in the way of performing arts, etc., and recreation. So I just appreciated you bringing that up.
Anyone else?
Yeah, Mayor.
Go ahead.
And Joe, we talk about this every year when we get together. How much interest did the Acker Trust generate this year?
Councilman Kuknio, actually, we were a little disappointed in the interest we had last fiscal year. So what we've done this year is we were proactive and we sent out letters to some nonprofits that we thought might benefit from this program, as well as entities that have applied before, whether they got a grant or not. So we typically we get about 5 times more the requests than what we're able to, and we try to spend the interest in the account basically on these grant awards. But this last year we didn't get as many, so we're reaching out and trying to get more people to apply for these grants.
Just because most of the time it's only the interest is spent, the trust pretty much stays intact. Is that right?
That's correct.
So I mean, this is good. It's going to go on and on. They're not dipping down, spending it to non-existence. This will be around for many, many years. So they're spending the interest to fund these programs, and they're all good programs, and people come very enthusiastic about it. They make great presentations, and thank you for doing this again this year.
Anyone else? Just a comment. This year, we went to a new level. There's no question about it. And the preliminary numbers that we're starting to hear is probably the donations this year also reached a record level. And the area served was expanded in both directions. And so we had more participants this year as far as business establishments. So it's continuing to grow like so many things downtown. The management, I think this year, and last year was superb. Scott Curry should be commended for the work that they put into it, and I think it went off without a hitch. So it's one of our better programs that we don't have to reach in the general fund and try to support it. So anybody from the public that wants to comment? Okay, thumbs up, I got it, yeah, okay.
Mayor?
Yes, go ahead.
I move to approve Acker Trust Fund fiscal year 2015 grant awards of $2,500 to Music Fest, $2,500 to the Yavapai College Foundation - Horizon School Matinee, and $2,600, $650 to the Yavapai Symphony Association.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Vote, please. Okay.
Councilman Blair?
Yes.
Passes unanimously.
Okay. Item D.
Item 2D, approval of annual support and maintenance for on-base document imaging system software by DataBank IMX in the amount of $29,994.95 using State of Arizona contract number EPS 090009-3 pricing.
Thank you. Yeah, this is the annual support for OnBase. OnBase is a product that we use across the city and all the departments, from PD to Public Works to Finance to the clerk's office, for document imaging and managing. And the annual contract is about $30,000 for the support. With that, I'd be glad to answer any specific questions about the system.
Comments, questions? Public? Need a motion?
Mayor, I move to approve the annual support and maintenance for the OnBase document imaging system by DataBank IMX using State of Arizona contract pricing in the amount of $29,994.95.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Vote, please.
Councilman Blair?
Yes.
Passes unanimously.
Item E.
Item 2E, acceptance of Arizona Department of Transportation funding grant in the amount of $67,500 for design of improvements, including the Papi and Riel navigation aids for runway 12 and 30, and the Papi navigation aid for runway 3R and 21L, and approval of authorization of services number 6 for accomplishment of the design by Dibble Engineering in amount not to exceed $64,192, city contract number 2014-029A6.
Good afternoon, Mayor. Good afternoon, Mayor. Honorable members of the City Council, I'm John Cox, Prescott Airport Manager. This action item request is actually twofold. The first one is to accept an ADOT grant, the Arizona Department of Transportation Aeronautics Division grant of 90% for the design of the replacement of runway 12 and 30 reels, which are actually runway end identifier lights and the precision approach path indicator lights. Both of these systems were actually installed in the end of 1970s, early 1980s, so they've certainly exceeded their useful life. These systems actually provide navigational aids, both visual and through instrumentation, and guidance information for the pilots to find and maintain the correct approach to the end of the runway for landing during inclement weather. Runway 1230 is actually our crosswind runway, not the primary runway direction according to a windrose, and it's normally during inclement weather is actually when they really need to utilize these approach aids. The other instrumentation is actually for the primary runway, which is called runway 3 right and 21 left. It's a precision approach path indicator. Again, that's a replacement for instrumentation that was installed in the early 80s, so it's older than 30 years old and really just has exceeded its useful life. The second item, as well, requesting for approval is to award the design contract to Dibble Engineering. Dibble Engineering was awarded the master contract for city professional services at the airport under city contract number 2014-028. It was approved by the City Council September the 24th of 2013. And actually, the Dibble Engineering is very aggressive in partnering with local engineering firms here in Prescott and in the region for subcontracting additional services. So, for example, this project, 31% of the work under this authorization of services will go to Civil Tech Engineering here locally. There's also around 18% that goes towards the Disadvantaged Business Enterprises, a DBE firm as well. So up to 50% of this project will actually be outsourced to both local professional services and disadvantaged business enterprises. The total 90% ADOT share is about $67,500. The Dibble contract amount is, for $64,192. The 10% share from the city is about $7,500 for a total grant estimate, if you will, of around $75,000. There is a little bit of a surplus there of around $11,000 that may go towards some additional environmental or NEPA planning and reporting for that, which has not been identified as of yet. We're hopeful to complete this design phase, actually to begin the bid phase for the construction of these improvements anticipated in June. And hopefully that's when we'll actually be receiving the grant award for the construction phase as well. The construction phase is estimated to be around $215,000 just for the purchase of this, the equipment, if you will, and they will be LEDs, so they will be the latest and most modern lighting equipment and the specialty equipment, so that it's better for pilot visibility. Are there any questions that council members may have?
No question. Comments from the
I got a
audience?
question, Mayor.
Go for it.
$64,000, John, what does that buy us as far as engineering of something that's already in the ground? What do they have to re-engineer that would cost $64,000?
Actually, the existing equipment is so outdated that it will require an overall structural engineer and design, if you will, because they are brand new components. So to tie those into our existing lighting systems is going to take quite a bit of, I want to say, increased design. And one of the reasons why we have Civil Tech on board and subcontracted as well is just for the identification of where those lines will actually be and how they're going to tie into the existing and the future Power Vault locations, sir.
Thank you for your explanation.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Anyone else?
And if I could just add one point, Steve, to your question, approximately 15,000 of it is just for the electrical engineer design work, correct?
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
John, just a comment before we go here. There's been some discussion recently in the media about how much it costs to build an airport. Have you been following that? And it's all the way from, what, 100,000 to 300 million? Or was it 3 billion? We're not going there, are we?
$3 billion would be a very, very, very nice airport, sir.
Okay.
Yeah. We would be a relief facility for Denver International Airport.
Yeah.
For that.
And I just read this morning that they have extended one runway is now 3 miles. 3 miles. A new runway.
That's quite an extension.
Yeah.
There isn't an aircraft on the planet today that needs the 3-mile airstrip, sir.
Yeah. Well, if I was flying it, it'd probably take that many. So. And one other just question is, before you came aboard, we invested in a study to determine if there was any birds on the airport about 3 years ago. Was that ever finished?
Yes, actually, I'm very proud that we've been working in close association with an intern from Embry-Riddle, and the intern completed a full study we call the environmental. It's a bird hazard Action Working Group, an ABASH program, and that is, exclusively for the study of any varmints, any birds, anything that can detract from the directional control of an aircraft, and we have finished that study, and that is something that is required again by the FAA for us to minimize any type of animal attractants, any predators that could actually access the airport property. That could be a detriment to any of the aircraft out there.
Well, if you need a resolution from the council prohibiting birds flying out there, well, whatever you need, we'll make sure you get it. And
thank you for your support.
And there's also Javelina. I understand that dig holes out there too. So, yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Mayor, I think you brought up something, and maybe a little more clarification on that too, because I read it and it kind of hit me the wrong way. It was a letter to the editor that I read, and a gentleman was claiming that we were spending $1 billion on the airport, and he divided it by the amount of citizens in Prescott and came up with this huge amount. But really, what we've decided on is ballpark around $50 to $55 million, with most of that funding coming from federal grants, from ADOT, with the city picking up about 10% of the total construction cost for all these plans. And not only that, but these plans are spread out over the next 10 to 15 years. And I just wanted to say that publicly, because there was a lot of, once something gets life, it starts breathing. While I was watching on Facebook, people were complaining that we were spending $1 billion of the taxpayers' money to build an airport from the city coffers.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, I think we're done to that. Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Okay.
Are you going to draft the resolution in a language that any bird brain could read it? All right. I move to accept ADOT grant number E5S1Y in the amount of $67,500. And do these need to be made in two motions, John, or one?
I think we can do them in one.
And approve authorization services number 6 under city contract number 2014-029 with Dibble Engineering in amount not to exceed $64,192.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. Vote, please.
Councilman Blair?
Yes.
Passes unanimously.
Okay. Item F.
Item 2F, adoption of resolution number 4267-1476, authorizing the cooperative procurement of a replacement regional use hazardous materials response vehicle with Central Yavapai Fire District.
Good afternoon, Mayor, council members. I'm before you this afternoon in seeking your support and approval to mutually develop a specification for the purchase and eventual deployment along with the purchase for a regionally acquired hazardous materials response vehicle. As you may or may not be aware, our current piece of apparatus that serves that need was originally developed in 1988. And it was remodeled basically to meet a hazardous materials response need for the community in 1994. The mileage is estimated about roughly since we acquired the vehicle at about the 1994 time frame, the mileage was 185,000. Today it's carrying about 270,000 miles. We've worked with Fleet Services Division, the fire department. We've worked to timely replace these apparatus. However, due to its special and unique needs, these aren't determined based upon mileage necessary as much as once it's outlived its usefulness, and that is the present status that this apparatus carries. Funding for this in the form of $300,000 for the city share is available in the capital purchase account, and Central Yavapai Fire District back on October 21st has already approved the joint purchase to equal that amount of $300,000. With that, we're looking at a total vehicle replacement cost of $600,000. The vehicle will be co-hosted between Central Yavapai and the City of Prescott Fire Department along the 69 corridor, which allows it to meet our operational needs between the two agencies that are partner to the agreement. And with that, I'd entertain any questions. We also have representatives from Central Yavapai here today.
Charlie.
Mayor, thank you. And Chief, thank you for bringing this forward. Thank you to Central Yavapai for partnering with us on this. It is something that is needed. I'd like to thank Fleet Services for their efforts in keeping the existing truck going. I recently went for a test ride, and it is a very scary vehicle to drive down Prescott Lakes Parkway in, or to do 20 miles an hour up Prescott Lakes Parkway. So it's timely. I was aware that it died in the middle of an intersection responding to a call once, so I'm happy to see this moving forward. Again, thank you for the partnership opportunity to defray the cost.
Thank you very much.
Jim?
Thank you, Mayor. Chief, thank you for your presentation. Here again, from the year 1994 to 2014's 20 years, it's not just about the vehicle. It's about what the vehicle carries, about what our fire personnel are exposed to. And I live in the county as well as in the city. So I'm very happy, like my fellow council, to seeing the county and the city working together rather than as separate agencies all wanting to have their own truck, because it's my money both ways. So I'm very happy to see what we're doing here. And I would like a little bit, if you're prepared, if you're not, that's okay. I know methamphetamines is a big deal. I know some of the chemicals that we use just if for no other reason than to pave the roads is different today than it was 20 years ago. Elaborate a little bit on some of the hazardous waste materials, some of the hazardous things that your guys are having to deal with and Yavapai County's having to deal with when they are firemen.
Well, just real briefly, during my short tenure here of about 6 months, I can tell you with a degree of certainty that vehicle has responded to at least 4 calls where it's been a necessary resource to have out there. Calls for service, they're as varied as probably the most notable in recent times was a U-Haul truck being used by a welder and a welding service, which caught fire and in turn had some spillage and runoff associated with that. We involve, as I call, methyl ethyl bad stuff, or a variety of environmentally or otherwise immediately dangerous to life and health products that transit our community day in and day out. The carcinogens, just the basic hazardous materials, flammable liquids, combustibles. And, you know, these are low frequency, high risk events when they do occur. It's usually a very critical sense of time to order to mitigate the event, and this particular resource has been used very successful in this community, and I think with that it speaks measures for what we've done for the protection of public safety.
Thank you very much. Low frequency, high risk. We've been through enough of that in this town. So thank you for participating with Yavapai County. Thank you for bringing this forward.
Thank you, Mayor Kelso.
Chris.
Yeah, you know, I agree with this purchase too. You know, it lets them go confidently into a situation and mitigate a risk. And I got to experience it firsthand at my business when we found a foot in the trash. They were out there for a couple days, or about a day. But this is a great way to act regionally and stretch our public safety dollars. So I'm all for this. I love the cooperation.
Anyone else? Senator Yavapai,
yeah, you want to
come down and we want to tell you we're appreciative of working with us and vice versa.
Thank you.
You're free to comment.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We appreciate you guys' opportunity to go out to bid for this equipment. We approved it in October at our fire board meeting. Today we are having a fire board meeting same time as a council meeting, so Chief Freitag couldn't be here to comment. But being a member of the Hazardous Materials Response Team since 1996, and then being a part of the joint operations is a very successful program. So thank you for the opportunity, and we appreciate your support.
Okay, well, you can call the chief and tell him because of our age it takes a little longer, but it's a done deal. How's that?
And we know it takes time. It takes a long process to get this thing going, so we approved to go out to bid, and looking forward to getting a top-notch vehicle for us.
We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
Mayor?
Any comments from the public? Okay, got two thumbs up. So.
Mayor, move to adopt resolution number 4267-1476.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Let's vote, please.
Councilman Blair?
Yes.
Passes unanimously.
Okay, item G.
Item 2G, approval of special use permit SUP 14-002 for the installation of a cell tower at 1115 Iron Springs Road, site zoning business regional, property owner 1117 Iron Springs Road LLC, APN 115-09-036A.
Good afternoon, Mayor and
Good
Council.
afternoon.
Section 2.449 of the Land Development Code establishes a special use permit process for all cellular telecommunication towers, with the exception of those that are owned and operated by a governmental entity. And the location of the proposed tower in this agenda item is Savawini's Western Wear, which is right across the street from Whole Foods on Iron Springs Road. Property is zoned business regional, which allows for telecommunication facilities with an approved SUP. The proposed site is at the southeast end of the parcel, and behind the building is seen from Iron Springs Road, generally in this area here on the overhead map. The tower is proposed to be 65-foot monopole, designed with a three antenna array near the top, with space below for potential co-location by other carriers. And the pole and the antenna array are proposed to be painted a flat gray to help blend into the background. The access to the site is along an existing 12-foot easement on the southeast side of the property. And the proposed installation will also include a 30 by 40 prefabricated building, which will be within a fenced compound. Now, the setbacks for this zone district are equal to the height of the tower. Should be 65 feet on all sides, and the pole is proposed to be 120 feet from the front of the property, 21 feet from the southwest property line, 27 feet from the southeast property line, Again, the height limitation in this zone district is 50 feet up to 100 feet with an approved SUP. So the council can and may approve a reduced setback as part of this proposal, as part of the SUP process. Planning Zoning Commission did recommend unanimously approval at their August 14th meeting for this particular request. And with that, make you aware that we do have a representative of Reliant Land Services, Reg Destry, today, here to answer any questions that you might have about the particular design for this Verizon proposal.
Was this the exact recommendations that came forward from P&Z?
The P&Z had a couple of conditions of approval, Mayor, including the specific distances from the property line, those that being proposed, 21 feet from the southwest property line, 27 feet from the southeast property line, and then a further condition that the paint color be a flat gray.
So this ties to their recommendation?
That's correct.
Okay. Charlie?
Yeah, Mayor, thank you. Tom, a couple of questions. Number one, the siting of this location is right against the corner of the property line. Was there any consideration to placing this so that the total height of the pole would not exceed the distance if it were to fall outside the property line?
Mayor, Council, Councilman Arnold, perhaps that's a good question for Mr. Destry, if we could ask him to come up and address council with the specifics of what he looked at in citing this at this particular location.
Good afternoon.
Mr. Mayor, council members, my name is Reg Destry. I'm with Reliant Land Services, and I'm representing Verizon Wireless in both this item and the next one. As far as the specific location on this property, our main goal was to remain as far off of the roadway as possible. So that's why we put it back so it's about 2 to 1 from the front roadway. If we were to shift forward, we would get a little closer to the roadway. That's not, I don't think that's really going to make a huge difference. But if we go any further north, we start getting into two issues. And there is an access roadway that goes through there. And we didn't want to block that roadway at all. In addition, being as far back as we can leaves the property more usable in the future. I mean, at some point, either Savoini's are going to redevelop that or perhaps sell it off, and there would be a new building placed on the property. It's very common when we do sites that we try and place them as near to a corner as we can. In this case, I mean, the other side of that fence is an open lot at an auto parts store and the auto parts store itself. We certainly could provide in the building permit process a stamped engineer's letter stating that the tower would be designed to remain within the smallest setback to the property line. I believe in this case that would be 21 feet. It wouldn't be an engineering issue to develop the pole so that it would remain within that distance, even though it's 65 feet tall.
Okay. Follow-up question, Tom, on the process. I've been watching the P&Z meetings. I've been looking at our land development code, and it seems like there's some gaps and some issues that aren't quite jiving with what the federal findings are and this process. And I wanted to get some clarity as to what we need to do to fix that issue from the city's perspective.
Well, Mayor, Council, Councilman Arnold, the Land Development Code was adopted in 2003, implemented in early 2005, and there are limitations. FEC imposed limitations on what the city can and cannot do in determining whether to approve this type of proposal. And we did provide information, specific information out of the city attorney's office in the staff report. And if I could defer to the city attorney, Mr. Palladini, and he can provide you the details on what the city may or may not do in this particular situation.
Well, Mayor and Council, the Telecommunications Act does not completely preempt the city's authority to have some discretion in these things, but there's certainly some limitations. The limitations are as follows: that the city's regulation can't unreasonably discriminate amongst providers of what's referred to as functionally equivalent services. So, for instance, if it's the same zoning, if it's essentially the same height limitations or height of a pole, if it's the same design, then the city can't choose one provider over another. However, the city can distinguish between a proposal in, say, a residential zone or a lighter commercial zone maybe be more restrictive than in, say, an industrial zone. So you have that discretion. The second limitation is that, and this is really where it comes down to the sort of the technical aspects. It's that the decision of the city, particularly if there's a rejection of the application, can't have the effect of prohibiting the provision of services by the provider. And that provision of services by the provider is really a key term, and that is if the provider establishes that there's a service gap in that provider's service, and that the proposed location and proposed design, primarily height, is technologically necessary to fill that gap, then the only real question is this location the only available and technologically feasible location? And that's a question for the provider. Once the provider establishes that, then the city either has to have its own sort of rebuttal evidence. It's almost like a court type hearing with more informal, or we have to sort of accept that provider's establishing of that. So, the question really for Mr. Destry is there a gap in service that this is intended to fill? And that gap can be sort of one of two things. It can be that there is no coverage in a particular area, and therefore there's a need for a tower, or that there can be there's a need for additional coverage, I guess. In other words, there's too much demand for, say, data or phone, and so there needs to be additional towers in order to sort of, I guess, provide more service. So that's another type of gap. The other ones are relatively straightforward, that we have to have the hearing within a reasonable time, that we cannot consider the environmental effects of radio frequency so long as it's established that the provider's tower meets the federal standards. That's the minimum. And then the last one is that if there is a denial, it has to be in writing and supported by substantial evidence. So again, I think the real question for the applicant in these cases is there a gap in service, and if so, what is that gap? And two, is this a technologically feasible and available site as compared to other sites that may be technologically feasible, but again, not necessarily available? You have to have a willing, in this case, landlord or lessor to establish the site. So even if there may be another technologically feasible site, if that property owner is not interested in leasing or dealing with the cell tower issue, then it's not available.
Okay. Well, thank you for that answer. And so there's not just a blanket, we have to do it because the federal government says we have to. We have discretion. And so unlike the next item that we're going to hear, my concern about this site, because we are looking to exceed the height limit and not meet all the setbacks, is the fall zone around this tower. That's my concern. That's my hesitation on approving this one, because of the proximity of the building immediately to essentially the south.
Understandable, and that's actually a very common issue that comes up and question that comes up, and that's why I had indicated we can provide a stamped engineer's letter to indicate that the site would remain within that fall zone of 21 feet.
Okay. I mean, as an example, in downtown, we've got a tower right on Willis that's right next to a house. There's nowhere else to stick a tower in downtown that made sense at the time. In this situation, we're coming into areas that have some undeveloped lands. And so, I guess my challenge or my issue is, if that tower were to come down to the south, as long as it doesn't hit that building to the south, then I would support this. Otherwise, I'm a no vote.
And just, again, when we're looking at the city's analysis, that's sort of directed or driven by the Land Development Code 24.49, which I think the community development staff sort of laid out most of the requirements. And in that section A9, one of the specific limitations that the city is allowed to address is the minimizing potential damage to adjacent properties for tower failure through proper one of two ways, or proper engineering and siting. So it sounds like there's a Siting can be, there's a clear zone if the whole thing falls over in one big piece. And engineering sounds like there's sort of a crumpling type.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Councilman, the best way to describe it for a pole like this, it would be designed with a bend in the middle so that if there were a failure, it would actually be up toward the top of the pole. It doesn't fall at the base because that's actually the strongest part of the structure.
Okay. Jane?
My question has to do with co-location of other cell service companies on this tower. The staff report that was presented to us indicates on page 3, number 5, that the applicant, yourself, has agreed to provide space for future co-location of other providers' antennas. Is that in writing anywhere?
It certainly can be. Generally, that's a stipulation that would be attached to the approval.
I would like to see that added as a condition of approval, that this tower, this permit allow co-location.
Does that necessitate a change in the height?
Not at all.
Okay.
Generally, when a monopole is ordered by Verizon, they build it to handle at least one more, if not two more carriers. This one being 65 feet, our antennas are at 60, the next people would be at 50, and the 40-foot level below that, I don't know if anyone would ever use it, but that 50-foot level right below might be something that like AT&T, T-Mobile, Sprint might be interested in.
Chris?
May I follow up with a question
I'm sorry.
to the city attorney? Can we legally require this applicant to co-locate if another cell phone company requests to use this tower? Can we require him to do that?
As a condition of the approval, one of I guess it would be condition 4, would say that this particular pole would allow for co-location. So what would happen is, if an applicant came in, a different applicant came in and wanted to build a pole, the question would be, you know, can that applicant co-locate? We can sort of force the co-location onto this pole so long as it goes back to that. Is this a technologically viable location for, let's say, an AT&T to use that pole? So we can force them onto the pole by way of this condition, and then Verizon and T-Mobile work out whatever co-location deal. But yes, by that condition, we can force not only them to accept it, but force the other applicant to go on to that pole, as long as the technology, or as long as it's a viable site for that other applicant.
We need some wording. I'm wondering if we can go so far as to say, as condition number 4 under the recommendation, the tower shall be available for other users to co-locate their antennas. Does that sound acceptable, Mr. Destry?
It'd be right after the painted gray.
Yeah.
Councilwoman Wilcox, we would have no issue with that language at all.
Okay.
All right.
Good.
That's a good add-on, you know, because we know it's a necessary evil to have these things up there, and you know, I'm sitting here with 2 bars right now anyway, so I'm like to see this stuff happen. My question, Tom, is how do they post notice for these towers? I know, like when you're doing construction, you got your little red signs you got up. How do we post notice for these?
We follow very similar to a rezoning or Board of Adjustment for a variance. A special use permit process involves advertising as well as on-site posting, and then we do direct mail notices to nearby properties. And in this case, it was anywhere from 300 to 500 feet from the exterior property boundary.
And you guys have gotten no input from the surrounding?
No input from regarding this application.
All right, thank you.
Okay, Charlie.
Yep, just 2 additional follow-up questions and follow-up to Chris. The warehouse to the south, is that, do you know just offhand, is that locally owned or is that an absentee owner?
I don't know offhand.
Then going to the 65-foot height, I understand the potential to want to put 3 sets of arrays into the future on there. What drove the 65-foot height in that area for Verizon?
Generally, as sites are developed, we come down off of mountaintops, and those mountaintop areas, especially with the older technologies and frequencies, and dearth of customers, frankly, allowed for coverage areas that were rather large. So what we essentially do is, as we come down from those higher sites, like to overlay with sites that are of generally the same height. I mean, there's some topographical issues that can counteract that, but it's very helpful to have the surrounding sites all about that 60 to 65 feet. So the site that's being offloaded here is actually up on the hill north of here. Or north of this site. It's a City of Prescott facility. They own the tower. To offload that tower, there are actually 4 separate sites, 3 of which are kind of along this stretch, one over at the high school, this one, and the one at the middle school. That'll be the next item. Each of those structures is designed to be about the same height, so they each have about the same coverage area. So each of their coverages kind of overlap pretty well, because if you do one really short site and a really tall site, it doesn't cover as much area and doesn't offload as much capacity.
Okay, that makes some sense. So going one step back, you all essentially are going to be creating these towers because of the increased usage of data, cell phones, et cetera, but it's going to ultimately lead to 3 towers being added to support this one that's in existence. Or will it be replacing the one that's in existence?
The one that's in existence, Verizon would remain on, and that's a co-location on a city-owned structure. These 3 structures, this one, the next one, and the third one, which will be here probably in a few months, would be to offload capacity for Verizon's network. It helps in the capacity, and it also helps with the newer technologies. The latest frequency bands are higher frequency and don't offer as good of penetration into buildings because of their higher frequency, so they do need to be closer to the users.
Okay. From my perspective, Mayor, the engineer's letter about the fall zone, I would like to see that included in the city's approval.
My question, who carries insurance?
Verizon Wireless.
They do that?
Yes.
So if it falls and it damages somebody's property?
Yes.
They're covered?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Anyone else? Comments from the public? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Dana McCready, 1691 St. Andrews Way. I've heard some discussion this afternoon about setbacks and fall zone. Perhaps Mr. Destry or someone on the council can educate me about what is the distance to the nearest building in this application. You've talked about an auto store. What is the distance?
Who has it? You got Charlotte, did you figure it?
Well, yes, Mayor. So
Need a slide rule?
It's 30.5 feet from approximately the center of the tower to the property line, and then there's, I would estimate, somewhere around 10 to 15 feet between the property line and the back of the building, of the closest building to the south.
So total distance is?
45.5 feet,
Okay.
approximately.
And the proposed height of the tower is 65 feet?
65.
So this building is definitely in the fall zone, correct?
Well, if it was falling from the base, as I understand it, the whole thing was falling, but the poles are designed that if there was a failure, that it would fall from a pivot point, which might be half the height.
Right. I understand that, but typically the setback with the cell tower, as mentioned in the Land Development Code, is equal to the height of the tower. Is that correct? That is typical in the Land Development Code?
Mayor, Council, that is correct.
Okay, so exceptions are being requested here. All right, and absolutely no comment was made by the property owner adjacent to this site, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you. We've had some conversation. Is it time to look at the LDC on this and be talking about bringing it up today?
Well, Mayor and Council, we have had some discussions, and I think the answer to that is yes. On the one hand, we have the Federal Telecommunications Act. You know, we haven't touched on it this afternoon, but I think we can make it pretty clear that the federal law does not allow a municipality to consider electromagnetic fallout, if you will, or effects. It's simply precluded from being addressed at the local level. So that's put aside, but there are other conflicts or inconsistencies or areas that do require clarification. For example, if you go down the list in the agenda memo, you know, there's a purpose of providing for the development of these communication services while protecting residential areas and land uses. You know, there are some basic questions of, you know, do these types of towers belong in residential areas? And it's true, may be able to minimize the impact, but that doesn't answer the question of whether they belong there at all. That could use some clarification. There's an intent of the Land Development Code to minimize the total number of wireless communication sites throughout the community. I don't think that that's happening. We've never really looked at the total issue or the complete issue of how many is it going to take. Is it going to take 100 more? You know, we do have other applications pending that we've talked about. It encourages the joint use of new and existing tower sites as the primary option. Well, if you do a 65-foot pole and you have your antenna on the top and you co-locate, the other ones are not necessarily, it doesn't seem like, going to be at 65 feet. They may be lower. I don't know if that's true. And on and on. So I think that there's some clarification. We need a tune-up in the Land Development Code that we work through, not really to tune it to the Federal Telecommunications Act, because that's pretty vague, actually. We just need to do the best we can to perhaps clarify and tighten up and make a clearer statement of just what, you know, how we're going to manage these types of facilities in the community, because obviously there is a lot of community concern.
And none of that approaches the customer who wants his cell phone to work wherever he's at. Chris?
Yeah, Mr. Destry, you know, I used to work in television, and I know that the towers that have the girder kind of structure, I've seen some of those collapse, and usually they collapse when they're under construction, you know, as they're going up. This is a monopole. Mm-hmm. How deep are you in the ground on this one?
The pier foundation on this one, I'm assuming they'll use the pier, would be about 30 feet down. It's about 3-4 feet across, 30 feet down.
And these are all over the place. It sounded like you said there's a crumple zone in the middle, well, actually towards the top. So if there is a failure, it falls closer?
Right. Well, it doesn't separate. That's kind of the point. Because of this being a steel shaft monopole, like
yes.
When you reference the lattice towers, what can happen there is separation at joints. Those towers generally are designed to collapse in on themselves, but the separations can occur. A monopole like this will basically be two steel shafts on top of one another. So they put a weak point in there, so if a failure does occur, it would occur up top, but it doesn't allow for a separation, so the pole starts to bend rather than actually falling over.
I see. And over the past 12 months, these are all over the place. How many failures have happened in Arizona? Do you know?
I'm not aware of any in Arizona, but I mean, I'm not 100% sure. But I've not been told of any, and I suspect I'd probably hear about it.
Yeah, the thing that, you know, takes me to a yes rather than a no vote is just that there has been no comments from any of the surrounding public. So it seems like they're not concerned about this, but I could see if you know, if you worked or lived in this, it could be a big concern to you if you have some kind of fear of that. So anyway, thank you for your answers.
Thanks.
Okay. Anyone else? Need a motion?
Oh, Mayor, sorry, one last question. If the tower were to move to the northwest by approximately 10 feet, it would take it from currently 1/2 the tower height distance to the surrounding property to 2/3 of the tower height distance. So it would have a significant expansion of the fall area, and that would be I'm just really concerned about the surrounding property. You know, I realize we didn't hear any comment back from the surrounding property owners. It's commercial. There's a high probability that it's an absentee owner. But I am concerned when you put a pole in an area where there might be a better option right next to an existing building. So if we were able to move it to the northwest, it would provide a much better fall zone. If there was something unexpected to happen that went beyond its crumple zone, it would prevent this from coming down on a building that's going to be occupied at least half the day.
My question, does the property owner that's leasing the space to Verizon have anything to say about this location?
Their initial input when we went and looked at the site was to try and get as close to the corner as we could. Again, there's a roadway there. Even that 10 feet starts to impede upon the driveway. And they were concerned about future redevelopment of that property. Right. I mean, it's kind of similar to, there are power poles that are right along the roadway there, and those are oftentimes just as tall as the structures we have, and they are oftentimes right on people's property lines. And sometimes they go in after people's houses too. I know Councilman Arnold referenced the site over in Willis. That's a Verizon site. Verizon has 2 sites in town here that are all of 3 feet off of the property line, and they've been there for a very, very long time. So there is a little history here of getting even much closer than this to the property line.
So there could be a property rights issue.
Yeah.
I think Steve was wanting to say something there.
Mayor,
Yes.
I have concern we're trying to micromanage this project. From my understanding, the information that I've read, Verizon has insurance, there's no opposition. We've been dragging this thing through the mud. As far as I'm concerned, we need to pass and move on.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion.
You got it.
I move to approve SUP 14-002 for a cellular monopole antenna at 1115 Iron Springs Road with the following conditions. 1, the maximum height shall not exceed 65 feet. 2, the minimum required setbacks are reduced to 21 feet from the southwest property line and 27 feet from the southeast property line. 3, the tower, antenna array, and other attachments shall be painted flat gray. And 4, the tower shall be available for other providers to co-locate their antennas.
Second.
Council, good? Good. Motion made and seconded. Let's vote, please.
Councilman Blair?
Aye.
Councilman Lozelle?
Oh, sorry.
Passes 6-1.
Thank you.
Councilman Arnold dissenting.
Okay, let's move out on Williamson Valley Road. Item H.
Approval of special use permit SUP 14-003 for the installation of a cell tower at 1801 Williamson Valley Road, site zoning multifamily medium, property owner Prescott Unified School District, APN 116-04-002E.
Mayor, Council, the subject property is Granite Mountain Middle School. Again, the property is zoned multifamily, medium, which does permit telecommunication facilities by approved SUP. The proposed site is located in a predominantly residential area to the east, and to the west it's residentially zoned. It is located on the north side of the large school parcel, just northeast of the existing football field, as you can see on the overhead projector. Site will have access by way of Williamson Valley Road, a 12-foot wide easement that comes in from the north. And the installation will include a 70-foot monopole disguised as a 75-foot artificial pine tree, and include a 30 by 50 fenced compound enclosure with a prefabricated equipment building. The tower is designed as a typical monopole, shown on this overhead, with a 3 antenna array at the top, and the monopole design will allow future co-location of additional antennas below the Verizon antenna. The pole exceeds the setback requirements of the Land Development Code, and briefly 130 feet from the north property line, 550 feet from the east property line, 340 feet from the west property line. And the Planning and Zoning Commission unanimous recommendation at their August 14th meeting, and Mr. Destry is also representing Verizon in this application.
So P&Z has put no conditions on this one at all, except it's supposed to look like a tree.
And we have an example of that on the overhead for you, Mayor and Council.
Well, I saw a couple of palm trees also, and they're ugly as hell. That's whatever it is. Comments?
No, I just can't let it go. Maybe the last one should look like a boot.
Mayor, two questions for Mr. Geis. Number one, you have some photos that show what it's going to look like from surrounding areas. If you could show those. And then my other question, luckily with this one, there's no buildings around it, so that issue's gone for me. The one follow-up question, though, is from the location of the tower, which is proposed to be up to 75 feet. What is the distance from the base of the tower to the roadway that services Granite Mountain as the primary ingress and egress?
Okay, we'll start. Councilman Arnold, if we could start with the before and after pictures. This is a view looking from Sidewinder on the west side of Williams and Valley Road. That's existing. Let's see. And that is after installation. This is before, looking from the west, in the nearest home. And after. From the south, before, then after. And the distance from the north property line is 130 feet.
Is the same opportunities there for co-hosting?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. The structure would be designed for multiple carriers.
And what if we get complaints when they do decide to co-host it from somebody that don't want to cut the limbs from the tree?
Luckily, the tree doesn't need to be cut. It is designed to accommodate that additional carrier.
Gene?
Yeah, thank you. Well, in Flagstaff, we used to call these frankenpines, and I know in Phoenix, they probably call them frankenpalms.
There are pine trees there, too.
Yeah, I'm wondering if there's any possibility of, not that we need it here, but in other areas, designing an artificial tree that actually looks like our native trees here, maybe a pinyon pine.
Well, and I'm sorry to interrupt, Councilwoman.
That's okay.
The example shown here, specifically this one, is actually an Aleppo pine, and we're not going to do an Aleppo. It's going to be a ponderosa. We can color it up so the way the clusters are set up for the needles now, they can make them green, brown, or yellow. So it offers a lot of opportunity to get a good color that actually matches. I mean, it's not going to be a neon green tree, because that would look ridiculous, because the trees here are brown and yellow for the most part. I mean, even when it's raining, they don't get super green. So we certainly go about trying to match that and go with more of a ponderosa shape. I mean, that example is clearly an Aleppo with a strange look to it.
When they first went up, they did catch everybody's attention, but over time, your eyes get used to them and they blend into the landscape pretty well.
Yeah, well, there are a couple really horrible ones in Flagstaff that you've mentioned, but they've gotten much better, especially some of them in Flagstaff look like very nice structures. Verizon actually has one right behind the Pizza Hut now that on Milton that's got 3 carriers on it.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion. No comments from the audience?
Public? Comment? Charlie?
Yep, Mayor, thank you. Again, in follow-up to my earlier question about the distance, realizing that, again, as I mentioned, in downtown, we're limited in our siting opportunities because it's fully developed. Here, we're dealing with a situation where there is substantial land in this area, and we're looking to propose a tower that, if in fact it were to come down, under whatever circumstances, based upon my calculation, because there's not a direct reference, has the potential to block the primary ingress and egress to the middle school. And I don't believe we have the equipment to readily move something of that size. If it comes down for a reason, there's probably something else going on. So my point and my point on the last one is not that I'm opposed to towers. I'm a cell phone fanatic. But I think we have an opportunity here because they're asking us for special things to say, here is what we're willing to do for that. And I would like to see that tower get moved to the south slightly so that the fall zone does not include what is essentially the only road in the Granite Mountain. So that's my position on this application.
But are we assuming that the entire pole is going to break off at the base rather than acknowledging that the industry designs these that they kind of fold up? So,
and that I definitely appreciate 100%, Mayor. You know, in the last few minutes, I've been reading stories about towers, trying to see what the reality of it is. And at the end of the day, I don't think it's unreasonable from my perspective to say we're willing to give you the height that you're requesting. It's not going to be difficult to move 10 or 15 feet on this site, in my opinion. That's solely my opinion.
You were making a motion.
I was making a motion.
And what does that motion look like?
Exactly what's written here.
Okay. Do we have a second for that motion?
Mayor, you have public who wants to speak to you.
I'm sorry, I didn't see you.
I'm bashful.
Good.
As a neighbor that just moved in to that area a few miles west, and having worked under some of these towers, I'm wondering, it's so close to the school, that all these signals, will that be, so it's close enough to all these students that it will affect their little brains and bodies and so on? There's some discussion about living with your cell phone in your ear all the time. Does that affect your brain? And nobody knows. But I was thinking when you were mentioning about moving it further toward the school, then have there been any studies about the danger of being too close to people? Because I worked right under them. There's a lot of electricity there. I happened to work in the building that had a metal roof, so I felt safe enough. I've never felt any damage to my phone and signals that it always works. So, but anyway, in engineering, is there anything about that?
Earlier, our attorney read some federal regulations that address that very issue. If you'd like to go there again.
Mayor and Council, the city is not allowed in its approval process to use the radio frequency issue or the radio waves as a decision point, so long as the application states that the pole meets the federal or the pole meets the federal standards. That's the sort of minimum, I guess. We can't impose or can't bring it up as an issue, so long as it meets federal standards.
So were you able to hear that? Yes. Yeah, okay. Jim?
Thank you, Mr. Verizon. Question relating to Councilman Arnold's question.
Yes.
In understanding that the property in question, I believe, is Prescott Unified School property.
Yes.
Does the difference between Councilman Arnold's request with 10, 15 feet in a different direction squirrel the deal of the cell tower, this cell phone tower being placed in its present proposal and configuration?
Let me say two things to that, Councilman. Moving it a few feet wouldn't be an issue because we have sufficient space to do that in this case. Secondly, though, the distance to the roadway is, I believe, right around 75 feet. If it would satisfy the Councilman Arnold, we could certainly meet a one-to-one setback to that roadway as it sits now. I mean, if they make it a 4-lane road in the future, we're not going to move our site. But
right.
Yeah, I mean, it's very close to 75 feet for my calculation right now. I apologize, I didn't think to put that on. Normally, we just do property lines rather than the roadway.
And if you're acceptable to that, I would be willing to vote in favor of it because, I mean, that's my concern is that single access point to the school. So
We have a motion on the floor.
I'll retract my motion.
Okay. Do we want, would you like to make a motion? That it at least be 75 feet,
Yep, Mayor.
and make that a part of the motion.
Absolutely. Mayor, move to approve SUP 14-003 for a cellular monopole antenna at 1801 Williamson Valley Road with a maximum height of 75 feet to the top of the artificial pine tree with a minimum 1-to-1 setback from the road.
Second.
Okay. A second? Okay. Motion made and seconded. Let's vote.
Councilman Blair?
Mayor, you're off.
It's late there. Maybe he's asleep.
Councilman Blair? Passes 6-0. Councilman Blair absent. Excuse.
Thank you.
You want to see if you can, will he come back into you, or you need to, maybe his cell phone battery went dead,
Or he's on mute.
Or his
or maybe he's out of
tower
range.
fell over.
Maybe he too far from a tower.
Councilman Blair?
Okay, let's go on to item I. We'll get back to him.
Mayor, Council, the city advertised a request for proposals for the installation of a wireless site on the Granite Street garage last fall, and only one wireless provider, AT&T, responded, and lease terms were negotiated, and AT&T Mobility is now seeking an SUP for a stealth cellular antenna in order to improve their service within the downtown area. There are two proposed locations on top of the parking deck. The northwest corner, and the southeast corner of the upper deck, and the enclosures are proposed to match the exterior appearance of the building. Will have an open top and be constructed with materials compatible with radio transmissions. The southeast enclosure includes equipment which will occupy 2 parking spaces, and the northwest enclosure will occupy a single parking space for the antenna array only. The antenna will be enclosed within 2 false elevator towers that will not exceed the current maximum height of the garage elevator tower, which is 66 feet. AT&T will lease the space from the city under the terms included in your packet, contract number 2015-060. There will be a one-time $10,000 site prep fee. Leases for the initial lease is for 5 years with 4 5-year options. And the annual lease payment is initially $20,000 per year with a 2% annual escalator. And all work necessary to install and remove the AT&T mobility equipment enclosures would be done at AT&T's expense. Planning and Zoning Commission did make a unanimous recommendation at their August 14th meeting. And with that, introduce Garrett Jolanis of Pinnacle Consulting. He's representing AT&T in this specific request.
Okay. Gene, looks like you're first.
Do we want to hear from Mr. Jolanis
If you have something to say, or do you want questions?
I welcome any questions or comments as the council issues them. Just quickly, I just wanted to extend my gratitude to Mr. Tom Geis and Mr. George Worley of the Planning and Community Development Office for helping facilitate this application. And I welcome any questions from the council.
I have a question for Mr. Geis. This is one opportunity where the council does actually have a copy of the lease agreement. So my question is, how do we know we're getting market value on the rent?
You know, it's a very good question, and ultimately I think I'd like to defer to Don Hirsch, who is the city's real property specialist manager. And Don wasn't, although he wasn't involved in the negotiations because much of that occurred prior to him coming on board full-time with the city. But typical of lease rates of other city properties, this $20,000 per year appears to be within the range of what other telecommunications companies are paying. What may not be within that range is the 2% annual escalator. And other contracts have higher escalators, but as I mentioned to you before the meeting, over time that has a tendency to push the price up to the point where the cell company's coming back to the city and asking to renegotiate the rate prior to exercising any additional or future options. And with that, maybe turn it over to Don to see if he has anything additional to say.
Mayor, Councilman, the rates that he was discussing are very much in keeping with the standard in today. The 2% is probably on the low side. What I've been seeing is more towards the 3% for escalators per year. The biggest problem we have run into, as he had mentioned, is over the long term of the lease rates could be so high that they become out of proportion to the actual going rates. And I've been running into that issue with some other providers currently. We're working on possibly renegotiating some of the leases and bring that to council when we had that done. One of them that we're working with is Blue Dot, and they represent some other providers. And it's been the same thing. They had a lease for 10 years now. The prices are so far beyond what the going rate is that the providers are asking for us to come back. So I believe the rates that we're talking about today are proper.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
John?
Mayor, thank you. Just so I'm clear, there would be 2 antenna sites on the top floor of the garage?
That is correct.
To fulfill the need. And those will be disguised like the elevator shaft, constructed of similar material, and if at some point in time AT&T ceased using it, those would revert to the city?
That's correct, and not necessarily a similar material. It has to be material that is in effect transparent for the waves to be able to get through. So it's, as I understand it, it's more of a fiberglass type material, and perhaps I turn it over to Garrett to expound upon that.
Yeah, the radio frequency material that he references is a fiberglass composite, and there's an epoxy resin that's applied after production that allows for that radio propagation, which with whatever frequency to propagate from that site. And in this case of the parking garage here, given the current aesthetic and texture and coloration and whatnot, the cell providers are able to mimic very, very closely, at least from these views, having a seamless integration between those constructed materials and then the existing parking garage as it is.
Are there any opportunities to co-host another carrier within that?
For the two compound dimensions that are noted in the site plans and on these, no co-location opportunities are viable. I've been made aware, though, that the opposing corners may serve future use if the council and city so deem so.
Okay, so co-location isn't viable the way that this is built up. It's not like the standard towers. The other 2 corners could possibly be used. You know, we're always struggling for operations and maintenance on this parking garage. It runs us, I think, $60,000, $70,000 a year. Sounds like this $20,000 will really help take a bite out of that right there. If we use the other 2 corners to another provider, say Verizon wants a better downtown, would that be additional 20 grand possibly, or would you be able to sublease to them, or is that still in our court to do that as well?
Mayor, Councilman Kuknio, that would be within the city's purview and the council's purview to approve a separate SUP for an additional provider. The leasehold interest, in effect, in this particular situation, is this area on the northwest corner and then this area on the southeast corner. So there is flexibility in the event that council would want to pursue something like that.
So, Mr. Verizon, as he calls you, we have 2 more corners available for 20 grand a year.
We're losing 3 parking places, and they're very seldom used.
Yeah.
There's been no recovery up there at all. Okay. John?
Last question on this, Mayor. Just because we've heard about structural things related to the parking garage, I assume that a structural engineer will sign off on this type of a use. Okay.
I can tell you, Mayor, Councilman Kuknio, there was quite a bit of time spent by AT&T doing the site analysis prior to submitting the proposal to the city's RFP.
Thank you.
Just a quick question for the city attorney. Is there a way that for future transactions, et cetera, we can restrict the proceeds from those leases to the O&M of the parking garage and make it a dedicated revenue or something of that nature as we have in the past for other things?
I would actually defer to the finance director, because generally speaking, that's what, sort of enterprise funds, but the garage is funded by the general fund, and it's not its own enterprise fund. So money goes in, money comes out of the general fund for operation maintenance. This money goes into the general fund. So it's not directly tied.
Yes, Councilman, as the city attorney mentioned, the parking garage is part of the general fund. The revenues from this will go into the general fund. In the general fund, through our financial reports that we do and everything, we do allocate the revenues associated with a particular function to that function. So, you know, I don't believe it's really necessary to have that as part of the lease, because that is how it is budgeted and handled in the general fund.
Thank you, Mark. I wasn't asking to make it part of the lease. I was asking to make it something different, so that the public understands when we get these monies. Just like the road funds or the open space fund or whatever, we have a specific goal in mind of when we do certain things to pay for it out of generating the revenue necessary when we go into some of these endeavors, rather than just taxing the general fund every time you turn around. So I think that's one we've done probably from some sort of internal policy, if I heard that correctly. So,
But you could consider that revenue when you give us an accounting of the parking garage just for our own purposes.
Correct. And like I say, we do with all the revenues from specific areas of the general fund.
Public? Thanks, Dan. You're giving us confidence. Yeah. Do we have a motion?
Mayor, I move to approve SUP 14-004, a cellular antenna site on the top of the parking deck of the city parking garage at 133 South Granite Street with the following conditions. Match the appearance of the building. The enclosure shall not exceed the height of the existing elevator tower. And I move to approve.
Mayor, I think we just use separate motions and seconds.
Okay. Do you have a second?
It's good for one and not the other.
It's
complicated,
Jim.
Different.
Do you have a second for the first motion?
Second.
Okay, motion made and seconded. Vote, please.
Passes 6-0.
Steve still gone?
Not able to get a hold of him yet.
Mayor, I move to approve contract number 2015-060, a lease agreement with AT&T Mobility for the use of space on the top of the parking deck of the Granite Street garage.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Vote, please.
Passes 6-0.
Okay, Adam J.
Item 2J, approval of PP 14-001 preliminary plat of Sierra Peaks Heights, a 6-lot subdivision encompassing approximately 3.28 acres, zoning single-family 18, property owner Alan R. Payne Revocable Trust, APN 115-10-004M, and water service agreement number 14-010, city contract number 2015-079.
Tom?
Mayor, Council, the lot range size on this preliminary plat, a little over 18,000 square feet to not quite 22,000 square feet. The property is located on Sierra Peaks Drive on the west side. To orient you, this is the intersection of Iron Springs Road, Williamson Valley. Lots 1, 2, 5, and 6, and they're numbered 1 from the south. 1, 2, 5, and 6 front directly onto Sierra Peaks, and lots 3 and 4 are a couple of feet below the roadway, so they will be proposed to be sharing a common driveway. Drainage will be conveyed along the rear of the lots, as well as along the lots 3, 4, 5, and 6 along Sierra Peaks Drive. There is an associated water service agreement in the amount of 2.1 acre feet, which accompanies this preliminary plat, and the commission at their November 30th meeting did recommend unanimously approval. And with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions. And I think Mr. Alan Payne is still here. I don't see Mr. Payne, but in the event you have any questions, I'd be glad to attempt to answer those.
Council, question?
Tom, would this is completely separate of the Forest Trails master plan.
That's correct.
And did you receive any feedback from the adjoining or adjacent property owners?
We generally don't advertise for plating type projects and for a preliminary plat because it's in compliance with the subdivision regulations, and in effect, if it meets those regulations, it's very difficult for the city to say no.
And last but not least, there is the curve here. I assume traffic is signed off on this?
That's correct. It was part of the review process.
Yeah. Otherwise, I've driven by the piece and I don't have any significant objections.
Anyone else?
I have a question. Mr. Geis, around that curve along Sierra Peaks, there's a little bit of piece of land between the road right-of-way and the parcel itself.
Yeah.
To whom does that belong, and what will happen with that piece of land?
My understanding of that is actually part of the Forest Trail subdivision and will remain ownership of Forest Trails.
So it's their common property?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's another reason why the arrangement of the driveways are as proposed on the plat.
And that leads me, thank you, Mayor, that leads me into that driveway. Fire is signed off on that driveway being in there like that without any turnaround or way to go through?
Well, that's correct because of the distance of the lot from the roadway. But yeah, and it ultimately may be at the time of final plat that some of these properties will need to be fully sprinkled as a condition.
And what's the surface of the driveway? Does it have to be asphalt? Does it have to be paved?
Yeah, well, it will be paved, but it has to be an all-weather surface. And actually, when it comes to fire access and residential lots, it's one of 3 or 4 different options. But that is minimum 20 feet in width, all-weather surface, weight-bearing, as examples.
Thank you.
Anyone in the audience?
Mayor, I'd like to make a
Need
motion.
two motions? You want two? Okay.
Two, again?
Mayor, Councilman Blair is back on the line also.
Oh, yeah.
Mayor, I'd like to move to approve PP 14-001, preliminary plat of Sierra Peak Heights.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Vote, please.
Councilman Blair?
Yes.
Passes unanimously.
Second motion, move to approve water service agreement number 14-010, city contract number 2015-079.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Vote again, please.
Councilman Blair?
Yes.
Passes unanimously.
Okay. Item K.
Item 2K, approval of RP 14-006, an amendment, revision of plat to final plat FP 14-001, Granite Dells Estate Phase 1A, to modify the interior side yard setback from 5 feet to 0 feet and change street names. Zoning single family 6, property owner Granite Dells Estate Properties Incorporated.
Mayor, before we start this one, I had previously declared a conflict of interest related to this plat, so I'm going to go ahead and step away. Even though I have no direct interest in it, that conflict carries through, is my understanding, so I'll be back.
Okay.
Mayor, Council, the final plat for Phase 1A was approved by City Council in May of 2014, but it was never recorded. And the residential portion is shown here. This is the portion of this revision of plat, included 208 detached residential dwelling units. And one of the revisions of this plat request is to include an additional setback, which would enable rough half of the units to be a zero setback, and it is still a single family, more of a townhouse type design. Another aspect of the revision of plat is the vast majority of the street names have been changed. Dells Ranch Road and Granite Dells Parkway remain the same. And a final revision, a staff revision, is the clarification of the noise navigation easement, which ensures that purchasers of this property will be aware that the property will be subject to overflight as a result of it being within an airport influence area. With that, I don't see anybody here representing the applicant, but I'll be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Question, Mayor.
Go.
Tom, as the director, if generally speaking, if there's any changes to final plat, it can be the call of the council or the call of the director to send it back to planning commission for reconsideration. Do you feel like this is a major change in the plat, or are you okay with that?
No, staff felt that this was a relatively minor change with adding an additional setback note, Councilman Blair, strengthening the language regarding the noise disclosure, and then the street names went through the Regional 911 and GIS review process and were approved by both of those.
Okay, thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Okay. Anyone else? Comments from the public? Okay. Need a motion, guys.
Move to approve RP 14-006, an amendment to the final plat of Granite Dells Estate Phase 1A.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Vote, please.
Councilman Blair?
Yes.
Passes 6-0.
Okay. Let's go to item L.
Item 2L, consideration approval of pay adjustments for the 3 council appointees, city clerk, city attorney, city manager.
Okay. Craig, you handling this?
No, I think this is yours, Mayor.
I got it. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a result of the meetings that we held last week considering the performance of, and let's start with the city clerk. The first item concerning the city clerk was a part of the agreement that, part of the hiring agreement. And so that is to bring that level to an agreed amount that would become the base of her agreed contract. So we need a motion on that. I see you're up, number 6.
Yeah, I would, but before I make a motion, Mayor, if I could, I think the process went well. Dana and Craig and John have all done an outstanding job. We, as council, don't always agree with everything, but I will say that from my perspective, because of their hard work, that we do have a healthy and financial secure city at this point in time. So thank you.
Okay. Jim?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd agree with the comments of Councilman Lozelle. And above and beyond, we discussed when we hired Dana that we were under hiring her at the time with the agreement that she would come here, perform, and then we would reevaluate. She's performed very well, and we reevaluated, and I think it's appropriate to do what we're about to do.
Okay, well, this increase still keeps the city clerk's base well within the structure of our competing communities. Yeah. Okay. Any comments from the public on that? Okay. Let's.
If
we need a
I
motion.
may, Mayor.
Okay.
On the first one, I move to city clerk move to increase the base pay of the city clerk by $5,998 effective December 16th today. Implementing direction provided by at the time of her 6-month as well as her annual performance reviews.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Let's vote, please.
Councilman Blair?
Absolutely.
Passes unanimously. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Okay, let's go to item 2. You remember that a week ago we looked at our overall pay plan and our public safety. We agreed that 3% was an appropriate amount and it was budgeted. And then we also agreed that on the merit side, the other employees, the other 350 approximately, they would be judged by their supervisors and using a range of 0 to 4.
Correct.
And that, I understand, has been done. And so this is our opportunity to move, again, the 3 appointees that we have direct relationship with on a daily basis to decide what type of an annual increase to their base. So starting with number 2, we'll be talking about the city clerk. Chair would accept a motion. We pick the number and vote on it.
Mayor, may I make a motion?
Yes.
Do we need to comment for each one of these?
You can. If you
Or I mean, for the audience?
if there's a comment, sure.
Okay.
Okay.
Mayor, I move to grant 3% annual increase to the base pay of the city clerk as adjusted by the prior motion, effective January 4th, 2015.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Let's vote, please.
Councilman Blair? Councilman Blair?
Bueller. Bueller.
Yes.
There you go.
Is that, passes unanimously.
That is a yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving along to item 3, same applies to the city attorney. You know the discussions that were held. There was no decisions made, and it's now time for us to decide what percentage to grant to the city attorney. I think the comments there's been satisfactory
I agree.
work. Yeah.
Mayor, move to grant a 3% annual increase to the base pay of the city attorney effective January 4th, 2015.
Second.
Okay, motion has been made and seconded to apply 3% also to the city attorney. Let's vote, please.
Councilman Blair?
Okay.
Yes.
Passes unanimously.
And item number 4, pertaining to the city manager, all the same applications apply, and the chair will accept the motion.
Mayor, I move to grant a 3% annual increase to the base pay of the city manager effective January 4th, 2015.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, motion made and seconded. Vote, please.
I'd like to
Oh, I'm
speak to
sorry.
the
I
motion,
didn't see it,
please.
Gene. Yeah.
I'm going to vote against the motion because I see that there is more room for improvement on the part of the city manager. There are many things that he's done very well, especially managing the financial aspects of the city, but I think that there is a lot more work to be done with relationships with employees and employee groups. There's a morale problem that we need to address, and I see that as a one-on-one kind of issue, not something that you can use department heads to filter down. Every employee needs to know that you're on their side, and this is a whole organization. You're responsible for the health of the whole.
I have a comment, Mayor.
I'm sorry, Steve, I missed it.
I said I have a comment, if I can, please. I would support the managers. I wasn't there last week, as you know, but was briefed on his performance. And I just have to say, shame on the council if we give the man direction and he doesn't follow through. That's our fault. If he's followed through and done an admirable job with what we set out for him to do, I feel remiss in not granting him pay raise. The man has done exactly what we have asked him to do and more, so I would support his raise.
Okay. Any other comments from the public? Any questions, comments from the audience? Okay. The motion's on the floor and has been seconded for a 3% annual increase. Let's vote.
Councilman Blair?
Yes.
Passes 6-1. Councilwoman Wilcox dissenting.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen and ladies, for a year of hard work. And I think that we've had a good year when we look at the total results. So thank you, John and Craig and Dana. Thank you. Okay, it's that time of the year that we appoint a mayor pro tem, and the floor is open for any comments.
Mayor,
Mayor,
before we do,
You can have the floor.
yeah, before we do, I would like to thank this council and past council for having me fill this slot for the last 6 out of 11 years. I've truly appreciated the confidence that the various different councils have had in my not doing something while you've been out of town. I don't think any one of my 5 fellow council members are not fully capable of handling this job. And for that reason, I choose not to participate other than to vote. I am not available for Mayor Pro Tem in the year 2015.
Okay.
Mayor, I'd like to move that the council appoint Councilman Chris Kuknio as Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay, any other discussion?
I would second that vote.
Okay.
You bet.
Motion has been made and seconded. Dan, do you want to say something?
Well, you stole my thunder. I gave a lot of thought to this, and I feared that Chris would be the one to choose. I feared, Jim, you're going to have your hands full enough with re-election. Same with Charlie. And that Chris being in his last year here coming up, since he's chosen not to run again, I know he's fully capable. I'm actually looking forward to seeing his own personal style applied to that position, and I think this will give Jim a good opportunity to experience advising his successor. So I independently had decided after considerable thought that Chris should be the one chosen.
Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I've got a comment from Georgia. How's that?
Okay.
I just want to state that, from my standpoint as being, I would call myself the senior council person, being the longest one serving there, that a privilege is being a mayor pro tem and selected by the constituents to do so. I've never believed it's about whose turn it is or whether it should be on somebody's resume. I do believe Lamerson has done an admirable job. He's always stood in. He's always kept me informed. And I want to thank him personally for his outgoing service. And plus, I want to go ahead and recommend that I think Chris Kukio would be a good selection. I think that if the mayor's gone, whoever the mayor may be, and I hope it is still you, Marlon, this year. Nobody's voted you out yet, have they? Not yet. Hey, I've been gone for 2 weeks. I don't know whether you're still mayor or not, but I think you are. But anyway, I support Chris Kukio, and I just want to let people know that I think the mayor pro tem position is a very important position based upon who the constituents believe should step in for the mayor in his stead.
Thank you, Steve.
Hey, Mayor, can I weigh in too? I just wanted to also say I think Jim's done a great job doing this, and I appreciate the respect that the council's showing me by letting me take on this new challenge. I look forward to working with you, and if you ever need someone to fill in temporarily, I'm happy to do that. And I think there's a lot of things that we've started here on City Council, and I'd like to see a lot of those get done over the next year. I'm feeling that short timer hurt, that a lot of the things, we've started a lot of good things, and I'd like to see them get done. And thank you, Jim, for all your time of service, and thank you, Council, for your support, and Jean for your nomination.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. I mean, my fellow council up here have changed the culture of what it means to be a mayor pro tem over the last 8 to 10 years, from an honorarium to a working slot on the council. Any one of the people that this community has full faith and confidence in to elect you, shame on us if we don't work with everybody here to be able to fill in for the mayor or anybody else in any one of the committee members' deals or anything else. And I feel very good about the council we have, and some of the council I've sat on in the past, that these people are more than competent to do anything, and they're more than willing to do anything that's put before them. So just share that with you.
I just had a quick comment, and I believe that Chris is quite capable. The only thing that I'm worried about is availability for quick signatures. I know Jim was available quite a bit for that. He's just down the road if the mayor was not available. And I know Jean, I'm not suggesting I'm busy, Chris is busy, Charlie's busy, and not saying Jean's not busy, but she's just down the road. And that's the only thing I would just want to be assured that we wouldn't be holding anything up if things couldn't get signed. That's my only concern.
Well, I just wanted to speak to my motion and explain that it has nothing to do with who's the better person, whose politics or what, or anything like that. It's the fact that the mayor pro tem is an important position, and that individual has to step into the role of mayor whenever the mayor is absent, they die in office, something, something.
That's not funny, but it almost happened.
I don't mean to be morbid, but, we plan for these possibilities. The voters get to vote for the Secretary of State in the state of Arizona to succeed the governor in the event the governor is absent from office. We get to vote for a vice president on a slate as voters, but the voters of the city don't get to vote for mayor pro tem. And for that reason, I think it's important to rotate the office once a year. And, you know, I had the same issue last year when I was new on the council. It was nothing against Mr. Lamerson. I do have a lot of respect for him, and we do have a lot of things in common. But I just think as a matter of principle, it's best to rotate the office of mayor pro tem. And it seemed logical to me that Councilman Kuknio would be a good choice because he has a little more seniority than either Greg or myself, and he's not going to be distracted by having to run for election this year.
Charlie.
Mayor, thank you. And my only comment is, Jim, thank you for your service.
Thank you, Charlie. It's a pleasure sharing an office with you, and I hope to continue doing so. You're a very, very young star coming through the process, and hopefully your educational process in running in the city council will help you go to where you want to go when you're 40 and 45.
Thank you.
Before I make any noise, I want to count the red and the green. We have a motion on the floor. Let's vote.
Councilman Blair?
Yes.
Passes unanimously.
That done. Congratulations, Jim. Congratulations, Charlie. It's been a great 5 years for me, and it's been great having Jim aboard because he is 2 or 3 blocks down the street, and when there's need for, and the one thing we have tried to provide is service to the staff. When papers need to be signed and there's important things going on, we don't need to wait. And so I know that will continue. It is important that the staff is able to do what they need to do in a timely basis. And many times that's signatures to keep the project on the line. So is it important to have commonality of thinking? Probably not, but sometimes it is. We all do a different job, and being together on issues many times is very important, particularly things that are important to the city, and many of those have to do with making sure that we're on the right track for sales tax generation and how we work with the public and the private sector. So, Jim, thanks for a great job.
Thank you, Mayor.
Chris, we'll get together tomorrow and work out some relationships that how we can best serve the community together. And I'm looking forward to that. So anything else from the public?
Mayor?
Council? Yes, sir.
I would just want to let you know I'm eating barbecue for you in Georgia, so don't worry about it.
Okay.
Hey, Blair, don't come back looking a whole lot different than when you left.
You said I was full of pork, and I can guarantee you right now I'm full of pork.
If you hear banjos, run.
Hey, in all seriousness, I just got a chance to watch.
Good job, Steve. Thank you.
Army specialists graduate tonight from Fort Benning, and our country is safe.
Wonderful. I spent some time there. I know the Chattahoochee River.
I'm
Very good.
right by it right now, Mayor, and there's no raptors flooding down it.
No, I doubt if there would be, but is there any parachuters overhead that are landing in the water?
Not yet.
Okay. I guess we're done for the day, so we're adjourned.
I've eaten a barbecue place right on the Chattahoochee River. Yeah, it's right downtown, and it's